If you want to remember one thought from this service, here it is. I just wonder if we can have the mic down just a fraction. Thanks. You are not a nobody. You are everything to God. God is everything to you. My sermon title is The God Who Sees. And this title actually comes from one of the names of God in the Old Testament. And I want to read just part of the story. You can read the rest of it for yourself when you have time. I want to read part of the story that comes from Genesis 16. And it's the story of Hagar. Hagar, the slave. Hagar, the Egyptian slave. And it says that Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. Hagar fled. And from verse 7 onwards, it says, the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress, Sarah. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. Truly, she said, I have seen him who looks after me. And since that time the well was called Beer Lahai. That is the first story of Hagar. She calls God the God who sees her. And it's not very many pages further on, in chapter 21, when we have another story about Hagar, the servant girl, the slave. And we'll read from about verse 9. It says, Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptians, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. She said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son. And verse 14, so Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, put it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. two stories about someone who was so insignificant, a slave girl, and yet these stories remind us of God's care for individual people, for unimportant people. There's another story of someone who was by himself, who was isolated, and it's the story of Jacob. We won't tell the whole story, but you remember that Jacob tricked his brother Esau into selling him the birthright, and then he deceived his father Isaac into giving him the blessing. And after that, Esau was so angry he wanted to kill his brother. And so his mother told him he should go to some relatives that lived quite a way away. So I want to read the story of Jacob when he is fleeing from his brother and from home. So it's Genesis chapter 28 and verse 10 onwards. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. Have you ever slept on the bare earth? Have you ever slept on soft sand? Well, a long time ago, some friends and I were hitchhiking from college to Perth. And that was a fairly ambitious thing to do, and we got stuck in Ceduna one night, and it was really cold, and we didn't have anywhere to sleep, so we went out of Ceduna town and slept in the sand dunes. And for about the first half a minute, the sand is lovely and comfortable, but after a while it feels like concrete. And so we woke up, we decided about 2 o'clock in the morning that this was getting too cold and too uncomfortable. So we walked back into town and we knocked on the door of the local Methodist minister and asked him if there was somewhere we could sleep. So we actually slept in the Methodist church that night for the rest of the night. And that was a lot more comfortable than sleeping on the sand. So imagine how comfortable Jacob was sleeping out in the open with a rock for his pillow. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Try to imagine how lonely and how unhappy Jacob was fleeing from his home in such a circumstance. And yet when God found him, he saw that God had not forgotten him, that he was there with him all the time. When I worked in New Guinea, lived there 6 years. I used to travel home at night a lot from the city of Port Moresby back to the college, and it was a lonely road, not many vehicles on it, and we were aware that if you broke down on that road at night, it was actually very dangerous. And I remember driving that road one night and someone else had broken down. An Australian couple, a man and a lady, had broken down. Their vehicle had somehow had some trouble. And I picked them up and took them to their compound. But it's actually quite a dangerous thing to happen. And my favourite psalm during that time was the Shepherd's Psalm. I used to recite it to myself quite often. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that was a very strengthening, very comforting psalm. I want you to notice another psalm that reminds us of God's care for people. Psalm 37. And I think this psalm speaks to us when we have challenges in our lives, in our families, and with other people who don't treat us well. We'll read from verse 3 to 11. Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while the wicked will be no more. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Doesn't really take very much observation to know that we live in a very troubled world today. And these last few years since, I guess, COVID began and lots of other things have happened, the world seems to be falling apart. And these psalms are here to remind us that God is still present in this world. If God is not here in this world, then there's no hope for anyone. Another psalm of refuge and of encouragement is Psalm 46. And I'd like to read just the first few verses and the last few verses. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. And verses 10 and 11, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations, I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. In Psalm 73, the psalmist, his name is Asaph, is wondering whether God really cares for him. I don't know if you've been through a time when you've felt that there is no evidence for God working in your life, or whether you felt yourself drifting away from faith in God. quite a while ago, I was going through a fairly dark time in my own life and starting to wonder whether God really existed. And it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out into darkness. Because if you really think about it, if God isn't there, there's nothing. There is only darkness. You know, you can only be an atheist as long as you're alive, because when you die, there's nothing. And it's only our faith in God that gives us hope. And so at the end of this psalm that is a struggle to believe, he makes this statement in verses 23 onwards. Nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. A psalm for today is Psalm 91. You know, this next week is a very significant week, not just for what's happening in America, but what happens for the whole world. It's significant on a human level, but what is more significant is that God is still here looking after his people in this world. Verses 1 and 2. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. And verses 14 onwards. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honour him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. This psalm doesn't give us an insurance policy for bad things not happening, but it tells us whatever happens, God is still there for us. In Isaiah 41, we have this assurance of God's love and protection. We'll read verses 8 to 10. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you who I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous hand. The most wonderful story we have in the Bible is the story of Jesus coming to this world. Jesus is called Emmanuel, God with us. And Christianity is centered on the person and the work and the story of Jesus. Jesus gives us this invitation in Matthew 11. He says, come to me all who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. How close can you get to someone if you're working with them like that? It says that we're to take his yoke, that he works and walks beside us, and that he carries our burdens with us. It's a beautiful picture of the love of God. And Paul gives us the assurance of God's care in Romans chapter 8. Romans 8 and verses 31 onwards. If God is for us, he says, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son but gave him up for us all, how will he not with him also freely graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Jesus Christ is the one who died, more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, and who is indeed interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? It is written, for your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. With all the trials that Paul faced, he could still say that nothing could separate him from the love of God. There's one book in the New Testament that we need to study more and take more seriously, and that's the book of Hebrews. Because Hebrews was written to people who were about to see the destruction of their temple, of their city, and of their nation. There are some parts of the world where people have seen the destruction of so much. So many lives have been lost. And in the face of all that uncertainty, the book of Hebrews tells us about God's faithfulness and about his love for his people. In chapter 13, the promise is, I will never leave you nor forsake you. In chapter 13, the promise is, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in the same chapter, it reminds us of our future. It says, for here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. If you think we're living in a world that's falling apart, the future is not dark. The future is full of hope and full of glory. I want to finish by looking at a few verses in Revelation. And taking the theme of the God who sees, the God who cares, the promise that he gives, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Notice how close Jesus is to us in Revelation. Revelation chapter 3, in the message to Laodicea, he makes this invitation. Verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. How close is that Jesus wants to come and dwell in our hearts? In Revelation 7, it talks about, it actually almost quotes the shepherd's psalm. We'll read verses 14 onwards. These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. That is so much a reminder of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And remember in the Gospel of John that Jesus makes the promise, I am the good shepherd. And this idea of the shepherd is echoed in chapter 14, where it says that these follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And again in chapter 17, in verse 14, it says, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. In the very worst of times, at the very end of time, the promise is still there, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Jesus is still the good shepherd to his people. Let's read chapter 22 and verses 3 to 5. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants shall worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. And there will be no more night, and they need no light of the sun or of the lamp to shine, for the Lord God is their light, and they shall reign forever and ever. You are not a nobody. You are everything to God. God is everything to you.